Hello everyone, this is UnderMine, currently in early access, released very recently, for what they're saying is probably going to be like a 7 to 8 month campaign in early access-ish. You know, it's always kind of hard to tell exactly, but somewhere in that range, as they add more and more to the game, take suggestions, take feedback, fix bugs, you know, all the usual stuff. So UnderMine is a top-down rogue-lite in the vein of things like Binding of Isaac or Enter the Gungeon, or, I mean, Rogue Legacy has a lot of feeling of that too, even though that's a side-scroller, but you get what I mean. Now, I do, of course, cover a lot of these because I really enjoy the genre and I like to see how it grows and changes and gets iterated upon and gets innovated on and things like that, and that's one reason why this caught my eye immediately, is because it was clearly going for a sort of classic roguelite feeling, as in like Binding of Isaac sort of idea, but with some newer aspects to it as well. It actually has some things that remind me of things like Enter the Gungeon, even though the normal gameplay itself obviously doesn't, because it has nothing to do with guns. It's all about mining, actually. But one of the things that definitely reminds me of that is the idea that there are tons of NPCs around in the dungeons that you can find and rescue and bring back to your hub to open up new shops and other various services. This also has a pretty long-term upgrade system where there are lots and lots of things for you to do between runs in order to make yourself stronger and make your future runs more successful, things like that. So where it starts is you will be in the mines. Who would have thought? And you are in fact a mining peasant. Your weapon is a pickaxe, and you can smack people with it and you can throw it. And the actual first interesting part of the game really is the idea that enemies don't drop money. Of course, you need money in run to buy things from the in-run shops and stuff like that, and also when you die you lose a portion of your money, but the rest of it you get to take back to the base and use for permanent upgrades. A very familiar system. And in this case, enemies don't drop gold. They just don't. There is an item that you can unlock that allows enemies to drop gold while you have it, but even then they will not be your main source of gold. You have to mine. You will find veins of gold in the walls and in rocks jutting up from the ground and on statues in the dungeon and stuff like that, and you can smack them to get some gold from them, and you will be doing this a lot because that, like I said, will be your main actual source of income, which is very different for a game like this. Generally speaking, your main source of income is treasure chests and enemies to kill, but that's not the case here. And also, you will face bosses, as you're seeing in the background right now, an unsuccessful attempt against Celt, who is the second boss of the game. Pretty tricky at first until you get his patterns down, which I did manage to do eventually. But bosses do drop a lot of gold, as well as a purple resource called Thorium. And you can also get this from very rare chests here and there and some other stuff, but for the most part your main like sort of big bulk source of it at first is going to be successful boss fights. And when you kill a boss, I should mention that they don't come back, which is also another very different thing for a game like this. Generally speaking, in roguelites, each run is sort of its own self-contained adventure, and although you do have an overarching progression system outside of the runs, when you're actually in it, there are certain things that are always the same. Like, for instance, you will always get to the end of a floor or the end of one part of the dungeon that you're in, and you will face a boss, usually chosen from a random pool of 2 or 3 bosses for that particular floor. In this case, that actually doesn't happen. Once you beat a boss, they're gone, and you no longer have to fight them. So that is interesting. It actually gives it a sort of like traditional adventure game or action RPG kind of feeling, where once you have successfully gone through an area completely, you can do it quicker the next time because the boss won't be there anymore. And the Thorium itself is actually used for permanent upgrades as well as the gold, but there are multiple types of permanent upgrades that the game has, and I will admit that the game does not do a fantastic job currently of actually differentiating these two and why they're different and how they work, but it's easy enough to figure out on your own, and maybe eventually, this is early access after all, they will add some sort of tutorial or sign or something that tells you in no few words how it actually works. But the gold you can spend on permanent upgrades at the surface in your hub area. There will be a sort of wizardy guy that actually is the one that sent you on these missions in the first place, and he will have several different restocking things to upgrade yourself, and these are like relics that you can pick up in runs, only they are always with you. Once you buy them, every character has them for every run. You don't have to like find them in a chest or anything. And they can be everything from the ability to pick up gold by throwing your pickaxe at it, which is useful because sometimes gold lands far away and either like on spikes or across fire or something like that. And of course, one other interesting thing is there are, as you're probably seeing in the background, these adorable little green slime things called pilfers that are little bastards, and they will steal all of your gold if you let them. As soon as any gold touches the ground, they will start spawning and they'll pick it up and carry it off screen. You can smack them in order to get the gold back, but they're pretty fast. So the idea is you're supposed to run around and grab this gold as quick as you can, and the ability to pick it up at range with your pickaxe is extremely useful. It lets you actually do it before they do, oftentimes. You also have a canary, which is adorable. I'm pretty sure that's like a reference to the whole, coal miner's canary thing, and it will pick up gold for you as well, but not quite as quickly as you can, but it is a useful supplement to your gold picking up skills, because of course every bit counts when there are things trying to steal it from you. Now, there are also upgrades in the form of a blacksmith who you can rescue in the first part of the dungeon pretty early on. You do have to beat the first boss to get the key to rescue him, but once you do, he will be available for your main kind of general upgrades that also cost gold. These will be things like, increasing your swing damage, increasing your health, increasing your throw damage and your throw range, and some other stuff like that. Each upgrade is actually a different piece of gear that you can, craft better and better versions of, basically, or that he makes them for you, and this will help you get better after each run. Essentially, this is your main sort of run progression. And you then have also some other NPCs, like for instance the Alchemist, which is not unlocked at first. You have to do several different delves through the dungeons in order to actually find what's necessary to unlock them. I won't spoil that too much, but it's pretty cool. And once you have the Alchemist, you can buy potion-based upgrades from them. Things like, for instance, the ability to carry more than one potion at a time, which is extremely useful because they're very powerful effects. A bit like pills from Isaac. And you can also do things like have a global potion duration increase and other upgrades like that. Now the Thorium is a little bit different, because instead of unlocking permanent upgrades, this is actually your your hegemony credits from Enter the Gungeon. Basically, these give you items that you can then find in future runs. It will also give you a copy of that item as soon as you craft it for the first time with Thorium, but that isn't the only time you'll get it. This is somewhat confusing to some people, because since all the other upgrades are permanent, they think that when you get a Thorium item, and it's going to stay with you even when you die, but it actually is not the case. You will lose it just like everything else when you die, but it will be unlocked to be found in future runs by actually crafting it. And if you get a bit greedy and you craft more than one thing at once, pilfers will actually steal them, and you will lose them. They're still unlocked for future runs to be able to be found, but you will not be able to have them for that run because you crafted too many. I suppose this is to stop people from saving up like dozens and dozens of thorium and then going down with like 10 relics already equipped. Probably to stop things like that. So yeah, and each person has their own sort of list of things they can craft. The blacksmith can craft more physical relics that you'll be able to find, and the alchemist can actually make new potions and stuff like that. You'll find various recipes just randomly and after boss fights and things that add to the list of things they can craft and unlock for thorium, and you'll get everything from like just general interesting upgrades from random chests and stuff to boss exclusive upgrades that you get for killing a specific boss, which is pretty cool. It adds a lot of flavor to the game and adds a lot more difference to each run when you have this multi-tiered progression where there's so many different things for you to unlock and do, which is pretty cool. It helps make you feel that you're not really stagnating. Even if you have a fairly unsuccessful run, you'll often have at least enough money to just get one thing, just one simple upgrade, and that's often enough to help you keep going. And overall, I think the combat and the actual main gameplay layer of the game, running around in the dungeon and killing things, is really solid. Even though you only have a single weapon and it's just got two simple attacks, your smack and your throw, it feels pretty good because the enemy variety is quite high, so the variety in things you'll be fighting is really up there, even if the variety in ways to fight them is not as much, because you're not dealing with a whole bunch of different weapons, you're just dealing with the pickaxe. But that's always a big positive for me when it comes to roguelites, is having a lot of enemy variety. That way the strategies and everything that you have to employ are much more varied and interesting. And of course, the more enemy variety you have, the more you can combine said enemies in the same room to change how they all sort of work together, which is good. And this already has that, even in its early access state, down pretty well. One thing that you do have to definitely get used to with the combat that I didn't like at first, but I learned to sort of work around it, is it's easy to attack too many times. If you click very quickly, you can actually swing more times than you intend, because there's no cancel or anything like that that I can tell. So really the only problem with that is the fact that attacking roots you in place. So that means if you're fighting a boss or a large group of enemies, for instance, and you click one too many times, you can be rooted in place for one extra attack animation's worth of time than you intended and end up getting hit by something. This is not necessarily a problem with the game so much as it's just a bit to deal with the controls that you have to get used to. You know, don't get overzealous with your smashing the attack button. Make sure to click only as many times as you feel that you need, and maybe even stop clicking a little bit early because of the whole rooting you down in place kind of system. I've always been kind of in two minds about combat systems that really heavily root you in place while attacking, and I think that it requires a pretty specific kind of either control scheme or just combat system in general to make that work. I do feel that it is okay here. It still is a little bit disconcerting at times when it feels like I could have dodged something if only I just hadn't attacked that extra time that I didn't mean to, but it's hard to say. You know, it's probably mostly just my fault, honestly. And it's something that you have to get used to, for sure. You're very much like rooted in place. You're not a slow character, but you don't have a dodge. And the combination with not having a dodge and the attacks rooting you in place means that you're not an extremely mobile fighter. So that's probably why you have, by default, a melee and a ranged attack to help deal with this. You do have a jump, I will say, which is really interesting because that's highly unusual for a top-down or 2D-ish roguelite kind of system like this. You generally can't jump. There's no jump button normally, but there is in this case, and it works kind of strangely, but it makes sense. It allows you to jump over spikes, pits, and other hazards, and also allows you to successfully avoid other ground-based attacks. So it's quite useful. And I've noticed that there even seems to be like an upper layer to the game, where, for instance, if you jump up and you throw your pickaxe in midair, it will actually go over enemies' heads and not hit them, which makes it clear that there's like a sort of aerial layer to the game, which maybe they can do something with in the future. I'm not sure if that would be kind of clunky and weird, or if they could figure out a way to make that actually part of the gameplay. But otherwise, I think it's pretty interesting, and the addition of a jump button, as simple as it seems, actually does help to make the game feel a bit more unique, because it's just kind of unorthodox. You know, you don't normally have the ability to jump in a game like this, so it gives you some different movement capabilities than you might be used to. As for the items themselves, they're definitely going for the like high variety route, which I love. I absolutely love that in games like this, where there are tons and tons of different items that can all work together in various ways, and you never know what you're going to find in each run. Now, this does have its downsides, like the fact that there are tons of parts in the game where there might be, like, say, like a chest in the middle of a huge bunch of spikes, or a chest over a big pit or something. Those instances where you can come across items that you cannot obtain unless you have a specific item. And these are satisfying to come across when you do have that item, but if they happen too often, it can be frustrating, because it feels like, you know, only in like 5% of runs are you going to be able to have that particular item to get to that. So when it happens too often, it feels like every time one of those generates, instead of something that you can get to, you're missing out on the possibility to make yourself stronger because you just didn't RNG it enough to get that item in time. It's a bit weird, and there are a lot of those, and I feel that sometimes I get a little bit frustrated with just how many there actually are. Sometimes it seems like the level generates, like every other room, something that I cannot get unless I had like an incredibly specific item that I'm most likely not going to have by this point in the run, which makes it kind of frustrating to go against really strong enemies when it feels like you should have actually had the chance to get yourself stronger, but everything that was generated was just out of your reach for some reason. That doesn't happen too often, but I do find that occasionally it seems like they go a little bit overboard with the random generation, and things like that happen, and also things like hazards like spinning blades and mines, and electrified and fiery water and oil end up really, really close to the actual entrance to the room and get you hit, like, before you can even react. But overall, I think it's a really good game, and it's a game that I'm going to definitely be following further, because it is a very solid roguelite with its own identity, and I think that its overall upgrade and item sort of relic system and things will help to make it that much better as the future goes on, and help to have a good foundation of interesting things to add after that. So thank you guys very much for watching. This is UnderMine. It is available right now in Steam Early Access for $15. The link will, as always, be below this video in the description to allow you to check it out, or if you want to, just wishlist it so you can keep up with its updates as it nears release and things like that. That is UnderMine, and thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you next time.